Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. Today's video is going to be absolutely bonkers. Now, the data is in, and today we're going to go over how many Americans are actually drowning in debt, don't have an ability to save, are in default, and are living paycheck to paycheck. And the results, y'all, and what we're going to discuss today is absolutely depressing. In certain areas, 69% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And think about that for a second. 7 out of 10 adults living paycheck to paycheck. What if they have children? To me, you guys, this is super depressing because absolutely no one should be living paycheck to paycheck, especially in the environment we're in right now. It has never been a more important time to save money. If we prepare for what's coming, potential depression, definitely a recession, many times we can become winners on the other side of this thing. But unfortunately, that's going to be extremely hard to do if we're living paycheck to paycheck. So we'll go into a plethora of data today. After going into the article analyzing how many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, I'm going to go into a deep dive into the overall health of the consumer, looking at car loans, credit card loans, delinquencies, savings rate, and those things. This article is from PR Newswire, titled 69% of Americans in urban areas are living paycheck to paycheck, 14% higher than suburban consumers. This will break down where consumers are struggling the most. And again, you guys, this is an absolute failure of society. And I understand many consumers dig the hole themselves, but my gosh, you guys, things are extremely unaffordable, even for someone like me that essentially has no consumer debt, rising credit score. I'm making more money, I'm saving more money, and it's still hard. Lending Club released findings from the 22nd edition of the new Reality Check, the Paycheck to Paycheck research series. And I'll have this linked. You guys can follow that series yourself. Pretty remarkable stuff. Conducted in partnership with Payments. The Regional Divide Edition examines why U.S. consumers in urban, suburban, and rural areas across the U.S. are living paycheck to paycheck and identifies the financial stresses they face. This edition is based on census-balanced survey of 3,600 U.S. consumers conducted between April 3rd and 17th, as well as an analysis and other economic data. Some key takeaways. Consumers are facing financial challenges based on their location that led them to live paycheck to paycheck, with urban dwellers and those earning the highest salaries more adept to feel the pain of inflationary pressures and the rising cost of living. Very interesting how they're saying the highest salaries are going to feel the effects the most. Isn't that shocking to you guys? And there used to be a saying that I heard when I was young in this career that the more money you make, the more money you spend. And that's exactly true. At the time, I didn't understand it. But when we look at this map, you guys can see on the West Coast here, 64% of people are living paycheck to paycheck in one of the most unaffordable places in the entire US. Now, my area in the South, we're sitting at a whopping 60.5% of people living paycheck to paycheck. Shocking, with the Midwest at 61.4, and somehow the Northeast has the lowest amount of people living paycheck to paycheck at 58.6% of people. But again, you guys, I don't care if it's 1%, even 1% is too many people that are living paycheck to paycheck. We don't have to live our lives with that type of anxiety and stress. Today's paycheck to paycheck landscape. 61% of consumers overall were living paycheck to paycheck in April 2023, a level similar to April 2022. In fact, since March of 2020, an average of 60% of consumers have reported living this way. So since the onset of the pandemic, people have been living paycheck to paycheck. And again, that is so crazy to me, considering how much money was pumped into the hands of the consumers. Shocking to me, you guys, absolutely shocking to me. The share of high-income consumers in the U.S. earning over $100,000 per year who live paycheck to paycheck increased. So over $100,000, that increased 7% to 49% in April of 2023. And think about that for a second. If you're making $100,000, you should probably feel pretty good about that. That's a fair amount of money. So the fact that half of those people paycheck to paycheck, geez, man, they must be living in areas that are just so, I mean, think of the unaffordability, you guys. I mean, the unaffordability is all over the place. This is wild. Conversely, the share of lower income consumers that were earning less than $50,000 who live paycheck to paycheck dropped 7 points from 80% whopping to 73% in the same period. So very intriguing how it's actually the reverse. High incomes, it went higher. Low incomes, it went lower. But you guys, people that are making $50,000 or less, 73% of those people are struggling financially and living paycheck to paycheck. That right there, you guys, is an absolute tragedy, because the way that the American financial institutions are set up is any financial struggles or challenges that we have, they profit off of that. They penalize us, more fees, more hits to the pricing. In other words, when we have challenges, we pay more. While income is obviously a major factor, where you live appears to be almost equally important in factoring whether a consumer is living paycheck to paycheck. If you want to come back here, I would suggest it's going to break down some really cool stuff about the sediment in various locations, the regions. But really what I wanted to point out is it does vary from location to location, but it doesn't matter. Even if we take the lowest one, 58.6%, that is absolutely shocking and an absolute tragedy, because anything happens financially, medical, job loss, anything at all. From a financial aspect, they're dead in the water. That's not good. Before I go into the health of the consumer, I want to play one more video from a professional who's essentially saying that Americans living paycheck to paycheck is really not that bad.
The report also finds 57% of consumers are currently living paycheck to paycheck, at least as of the month of May. That figure is down, however, from 61% the month before. What do we think is behind that?
We think that consumers are adjusting to inflationary pressures, and so they're able to manage their money. They're starting to live within their means. That said, wages aren't keeping pace with inflation. So there's a lot at play there, but for now, it seems like a lot of consumers are living within their means and able to save a little bit more. And so we aren't seeing them bridge the gap.
So according to this expert, consumers are living within their means and they're saving even more money. But I'll argue that's not the reality, because credit card debt, auto loan debt, delinquency rate, all of these things are getting much worse. So that's what I want to go into today. So let me start by showing you the delinquency rate for consumer loans. Now, starting with the delinquency rate on consumer loans. Okay, so all consumer loans, essentially the delinquency rate right now, and this is as of Q1 of 2023, is only 2.23%. But what I want to point out is the trajectory of the increase of delinquency rate. You guys can see that as of Q4 of 2021, the delinquency rate for consumers has been skyrocketing upward. This is going to be an additional catalyst that puts pressure on the financing system. Now, I suspect when Q2 of 2023 comes out, we will be close or over the pre-pandemic levels of about 2.35%. What's important here is to understand the trajectory of these trends, and consumers are not paying their bills. Now, the woman also said that consumers are living within their means. Now, this information here is actually going to say otherwise. This is the consumer credit card debt, essentially telling us how much credit card debt consumers are in. I want to point out from about April 14th of 2021 to right now, consumers have generated roughly $260 billion of consumer credit card debt, which accounts for over 25% of the total debt. So in the last 2 years, consumers have increased credit card debt by over 25%. And please think about the significance of that. Credit card debt is essentially a prison debt. It keeps you attached to that debt, especially if you're making minimum payments, some of them 30, 40, 50 years. It's absolutely horrible debt to be in, and that is shooting up at a pace that we have never historically seen. And it's not just credit card debt, it's also car debt. Car loans these days can cost up to $1,000. People were buying cars like crazy, a depreciating asset, instead of saving their money to buy something like a house. Let me show you guys where we're at with defaults in the auto industry. Delinquencies that were 60 days or more increased in June for the second consecutive month and were up 18.7% from a year ago. In June, 1.74% of auto loans were severely delinquent, and it's so important to understand that that's right before a repo. Essentially, when someone's severely delinquent, usually the jig is up. Usually it's going to lead to a repo or a volunteer repo. That was up from May's 1.68% rate and was the highest June rate dating back to at least 2006. Interesting. 6.76% of subprime loans are currently delinquent. More pressure on the financing system. This was an increase for the month from 6.48% in May and was the highest June rate dating back to at least 2006 as well. The subprime severe delinquency rate was 101 basis points higher than a year ago, while the aggregate was 25 basis point higher. Let's look at evictions and see what's happening there. All I'm gonna do to show you guys this is briefly go to Las Vegas, and I wanted to show you essentially the filing rate for renters. There are some places in Las Vegas, as you can see here, that are filing evictions over 35% of the renters. So over 1 in 3 rentals, eviction filing. Really amazing. And if you guys go around Las Vegas, you could see other areas the same thing. 37% of renters, eviction filing. 31% here, 33% here, 62% here. 62% of renters, eviction filings. It should be no surprise why this is happening. Basically, quantitative easing failed, and the inflation was not transitory. And now the unaffordability is so out of control that almost all levels of consumer debt defaults are skyrocketing. And when people cannot afford to live, that will happen. This is median household income over principal and interest mortgage payments. So this isn't counting for property tax and homeowners insurance. So obviously Florida, the reality of like places like Florida, this is way worse. But I want to remind us that generally we only want 25% of our income going to our mortgage. So when we look at West Coast places that have 68% of total income going to mortgage, we understand that that's not sustainable. And that unsustainability and unaffordability is eventually going to hit Miami. You guys can see Miami is at 48%. That is not sustainable. Anyone that's a local, anyone that grew up that's not a millionaire is priced out. It's crazy. I think the fact that people were priced out allowed so many people to dodge a bullet they would have otherwise stood in front of. You guys can see that historically, the savings rate right now is absolutely in the trash. Only 4.6% of income is being saved. On average, before the pandemic, we were sitting at 8 and 9%. Y'all see that? So we are way, way, way down from where we were at pre-pandemic. All of this data together really spells out the picture of what's going on with the consumer. The consumer is unraveling. I believe they want and need consumers to continue to struggle, to continue to pay the interest, to continue to pay the fees for being late, so that the entire system can continue to run, because that is how our system is set up. So if it's me and I'm one of those people, I'm doing everything I can to get out of that rat race. And some of the best things that I have done to get out of that rat race, which I was trapped in, is the number one thing: figure out how you're spending your money. I use an app called mint.com. I track all of my spending. I have found that I spend way too much money on subscriptions and going out to eat, thousands of dollars. So when I found that out, I changed my lifestyle, and now I'm able to save a lot more money. Now, the other thing, work on your credit. Have no consumer debt. Can be so harmful for not only the way you live your life, but also qualifying for a loan. So you want to make sure have no consumer debt, make as much money as possible, be an asset at your employer, and don't forget to be an expert in your local housing market. Now, other than that, guys, if you're out there investing in real estate, you know I wish you luck, and I hope you win.